All right, let's talk about some Aristotle. How do we know anything at all? Complicated question here. Knowledge for Aristotle is something that you're going to construct theoretically, but you're going to construct it out of language. Now, here's what happens in the ethics. We take a teleological kind of analysis of things. We try to see how a habit or a quality, a character trait, contributes to our flourishing or gets in the way of flourishing. So we can give this kind of teleological analysis to get some insight into the relationship between different ways of life, different character traits, and flourishing as a human. All right, we've already talked about that a little bit, and we'll be seeing more of that soon, but I wanted to make a bigger point here about language. Aristotle famously says that being is said in many ways. And in general, he points out the homonymy in natural language. Justice is also said in many ways. There we go. I say justice is said in many ways there. Okay, justice is said in many ways. We use the term in ways that are identical with fair. To be just is to be fair. We use the term in ways that are identical with upright. Not the same thing there. We use the term also to talk about how we punish lawbreakers. Even if those punishments are excessive and unjust, we still talk about it as justice being done. So justice is said in many ways. What Aristotle's going to do here is take the natural language and fix distinct senses to the different contexts in which the term is used. So when we talk about justice in punishing wrongdoing, though we're using the same word, we're going to have a distinction between that sort of justice and, say, justice in fair distributions of like the burdens of society. Right here, maybe you're living with roommates. There are four of you living equally messy lives. Then there ought to be an equal distribution of the kind of maintenance, the chores, right, of the house. So that's a kind of justice too. Justice in the distribution of not only the burdens, but also the benefits of society, right? If there are four of you paying equal rent, doing equal chores, living in this space, then you each have equal right. Yeah, that makes sense. Equal right to, say, using the living room, using the kitchen, fridge space, right? So Aristotle is going to find that really, no matter what sense we're using justice in, proportion is going to be really key here. Proportion is going to be really key to understanding what's just and what's unjust. So in the context of criminal justice, there ought to be a proportion between the breach and the punishment, right? If restoration is possible, then there ought to be a proportion between what was taken and what is restored. That seems to make a lot of sense there. What about distributive justice? Well, I mean, we've seen all these examples with roommates and stuff like that. There ought to be a proportion of what you contribute and what you get out. There ought to be some proportion. There ought to be a proportion. You know, if you've got a collaborative endeavor, there ought to be a proportion between who's contributing, who expects to benefit, and how much those benefits are, or how much those contributions are, right? So justice is in a lot of ways about proportionality. So Now, Aristotle's going to say we need to give a teleological analysis to show that it's about teleology. That word's a mouthful. But we get the idea there. Okay, now let's talk about John Rawls. Just like Aristotle uses proportionality to illuminate and kind of give concept to these different senses of justice. So John Rawls is going to use game theory and thought experiments to get closer to an understanding of justice. Okay, so what kind of reason, how do we reason our way towards these truths that are maybe kind of beyond our ability to reach? Teleology has clues, which also means that what we can learn about humanity through not only medicine and biology, naturally, but also through psychology, through sociology. We should use everything that we can to figure out what human flourishing is and looks like, and then kind of give an analysis of the different senses of justice that that make clear how that habit or that character trait helps human flourishing, helps the human to flourish. Anyway, so while Aristotle uses teleological reasoning to give us an idea of what human flourishing is and what the habits are most closely resembling natural language understanding of justice that helps us to flourish, and that's how he kind of fleshes out the different senses of justice. Rawls is going to use the kind of reasoning that we engage in when we play games or when we negotiate to come up with a sense of what it is to have a just society. Now, there is an idealization going on. Rawls is not trying to figure out how to make this society more just, nor, of course, is Rawls trying to give a history of how we arrived at this just society. That's not his program here at all. His program here is to think about what would justice be like if we could build it in a lab, more or less. Of course, justice is a concept. We're going to build a society in the mind with idealized conditions and ask ourselves, what would justice look like in that society? So we need idealizations here. The idealization is going to kind of let us get some insights because we can change the details, right? So this is kind of what makes it a thought experiment. So Rawls imagines that the just society is the one that you would choose to live in. You would sign off on the laws and policies under this idealization. You don't know who you are. You don't know who you are. Would you accept a society that, say, had different rights for Christians versus non-Christians? Or a society that had different rights for Muslims versus non-Muslims, whatever it is. Not knowing who you are, not knowing what place you play in society, you're not going to sign off on that. The kind of reasoning here is the same that we apply, like when we play games, for instance. I remember when I was a kid, I used to play Monopoly a lot. And, in Monopoly, you make deals. You've got to trade that you're planning, and the people that you're playing with are the obstacles, of course. My idea is great. People just need to like sign off on it, and they're stubborn and they won't. Okay, how do you get people to sign off on your idea when they really want what's best for themselves? You want what's best for yourself. You're trying to make this deal. Um, how can you argue that the deal you're proposing is a fair deal? Is a just deal. Like this is treating you as well as it's treating me, even though I'm the one proposing it. Um, I mean, there's several ideas that come up, right? If it's a splitting problem, you say one person divides, the other person chooses, right? This we come up with these strategies for mitigating the sources of unfairness. So one is, one splits, the other chooses. That makes sense. Another option, though, that I would try to employ as a kid playing Monopoly is to turn the tables, right? If I've got a deal orchestrated where you put in a little bit and I put in a little bit, and then I get the oranges out of it and you get the reds out of it, say, then if I'm tasked with convincing the other person that this is a fair deal, and they say, I'm not looking for advantage for myself. I just don't think it's a fair deal. I want to do a fair deal with you, not one that's extra good for you. What you do is you turn the tables. Okay, well, instead of me taking the oranges and you taking the reds, I'll do it the other way around too, where I'll take the reds and you take the oranges. If you'll take either end of the deal, right, turn the tables. If you'll take either end of the deal, then it's a fair deal. That's what's going on here. Rawls says, suppose that you were had to sign off on the laws and policies of the society, the structure of the society, not knowing who you were. You would make sure that you would that it would be a society that's fair to everyone, that's fair especially to the least well off in that society. Would you opt to live in a society where, say, teachers are kind of forced to live in poverty? I don't think you would. So, being an idealization, you not knowing who you are, is the kind of turning of the tables, right? If it's a society where teachers get, have to live in poverty wages, you don't know if you're a teacher or not, so you wouldn't sign up for that. That's the idea. So, a just law, a just society is one that's structured in such a way that you would choose it. You would sign off on it. You would consent to living under it, not knowing who you were in that society. Now, what Rawls uses this to argue for is an idea of what the kind of ground organizational features of this society would be. Rawls says if you don't know who you are in that society, what you would choose is something that's offered a substantial package of basic liberties for everyone, that everyone had the same basic liberties and as extensive as is compatible with everyone having the same social liberties. And second, differences in society, who's, wealthy, who's poor, and whatever. All those differences in society would be organized in such a way that they're understood to be beneficial to everyone. It benefits even the least well off. That, say, for instance, surgeons make a lot of money, right? If I need a surgeon, when I need a surgeon, it's going to be to my advantage that society rewards surgeons more than the average laborer for that work, right? So we need a structure where the differences are understood to be to everyone's advantage. That's very different from a structure where the differences are the result of just fair trades. But this is an idea of a just society would be one where the structure is such that you have your basic liberties, and anyone who's not getting as much as someone else, those differences are meant to kind of make the whole of society better and tolerable, livable, even for those at the bottom. All right. So we use thought experiments, come up with scenarios, change little features of them, see what happens when you change this, what else has to change as a result, right? To try to show the connections between things, the connections between concepts, the connections between an unusual circumstance and a circumstantial excuse for something, you know. So we use these concepts, these thought experiments to kind of gain traction as we try to cross-examine these various views.